year is 1902. The United States Army is fighting a war it never expected in a place most Americans couldn't find on a map, the steaming, verdant hell of the Philippine jungles. The Spanish-American War was over. The U.S. had easily defeated the fading Spanish Empire, but now, in the southern islands of Mindanao and Jolo, American troops faced a new, terrifying enemy, the Moro warriors. These were not European conscripts lining up in neat rows. They were fierce, indigenous fighters who knew the jungle intimately. And among them was a class of warrior that struck absolute terror into the hearts of the U.S. infantry, the juramentado. A juramentado was a swordsman who had taken a ritual oath to die killing the invaders. Before battle, they would undergo a terrifying preparation. They would shave their heads and eyebrows. They would bind their limbs tight with cords to prevent blood loss, acting as makeshift tourniquets so they could keep fighting even after being slashed or shot. They would often consume pain-suppressing drugs, entering a trance-like state of religious frenzy. Their weapon was the kris, a heavy, wavy-bladed sword capable of severing a human limb in a single blow, or the barong, a thick, leaf-shaped cleaver. Against this fanatical enemy, the U.S. Army was armed with the Colt 1892 revolver. It was a modern, sophisticated weapon for its time, chambered in .38 long Colt. On paper, it was accurate and easy to handle. In the jungle, it was a death sentence. The reports that came back to Washington were the stuff of nightmares. In one documented incident, a U.S. officer was leading a patrol through the tall grass when a juramentado burst from cover, screaming, swinging a heavy kris. The officer drew his M1892. He was a good shot. At point-blank range, he fired. Bang! The bullet hit the warrior in the chest. The warrior didn't stop. Bang! Bang! 2 more hits. Puffs of dust rose from the warrior's tunic. The warrior didn't even flinch. The drug-fueled adrenaline and the sheer momentum of the attacker carried him forward. The .38 caliber bullets were drilling clean holes through his body, passing through soft tissue without shattering bone or transferring enough shock to knock him down. It was like stabbing a charging bull with an ice pick. The officer emptied his cylinder. 6 shots, 4 hits. The juramentado reached him and brought the kris down, splitting the officer's skull to the jaw. The American died instantly. The Moro warrior, riddled with bullets, finally collapsed and died on top of his victim moments later. Stories like this spread like wildfire through the camps. Soldiers began to distrust their own weapons. Morale plummeted. They were facing an enemy that seemed supernatural, an enemy that could absorb lead and keep coming. One colonel reported, "The .38 bullet does not have the stopping power to check a determined fanatic." The situation became so desperate that the army had to reach back into the past. Officers sent urgent telegrams to the Ordnance Department demanding man-stoppers. The army raided its old storage depots. They dusted off crates of the Colt's single-action army, the famous peacemaker of the Wild West. These were antiquated guns. They were slow to reload and heavy, but they fired the .45 long Colt, a massive, slow-moving slug that hit like a sledgehammer. When a soldier shot a Moro with a .45, the warrior didn't keep running. He was lifted off his feet. The heavy lead smashed bone and tore massive wound channels. The old cowboy gun saved the lives of countless young soldiers in the jungle. But the army knew they couldn't go backward forever. They couldn't fight the 20th century with a cowboy revolver. This failure in the Philippines triggered a scientific inquest that would change warfare forever. In 1904, Colonel John T. Thompson, who would later invent the Tommy gun, and Major Louis Lagarde conducted the grisly Thompson-Lagarde tests. They shot cadavers and live cattle with various calibers to measure stopping power. Their conclusion was cold, mathematical, and undeniable. They reported to the War Department that any future handgun for the U.S. military must not be less than .45 caliber. We need a weapon that will stop an enemy in his tracks. The failure of the .38 in the blood-soaked jungles of Mindanao created a vacuum, a demand for a new semi-automatic hand cannon. And waiting in the wings to answer that call was a genius inventor named John Moses Browning. The nightmare of the jungle was about to give birth to the greatest pistol ever made.
By 1910, the United States Army's search for a new sidearm had turned into a gladiatorial contest. The requirements were simple but brutal. The new weapon had to be semi-automatic, it had to be easy to disassemble, and, most importantly, it had to fire the massive .45 caliber round that Colonel Thompson had recommended. Dozens of inventors submitted designs. One by one, they failed. The guns jammed in the dust. They cracked under the pressure of the heavy ammunition. They were too complex for a soldier with muddy hands to operate. By the end of the year, only 2 contenders remained standing in the ring. In one corner was the Savage Arms Company. Their pistol, designed by Elbert Searle, was a sleek, futuristic-looking weapon with a unique rotating barrel and a double-stack magazine, a feature decades ahead of its time. It held 10 rounds to the competitor's 7. It was lighter, it was faster. In the other corner was Colt, represented by a quiet, unassuming Mormon from Utah named John Moses Browning. Browning was not just an inventor, he was a force of nature. By 1910, he had already designed the machine guns that would define the 20th century. For this pistol, he had created a system based on short recoil. It was a masterpiece of simplicity, a heavy steel slide, a tilting barrel, and a grip safety. It looked like a brick, and it felt like a handshake. The final showdown took place on March 3, 1911. The Ordnance Board decided to push both pistols to the breaking point. The test was unprecedented. Each gun would fire 6,000 rounds. To understand the scale of this, a typical soldier might fire 50 rounds in a year of training. 6,000 rounds was a lifetime of abuse compressed into a single afternoon. The firing began. The noise was deafening. The Savage pistol started strong, cycling the heavy .45 slugs with a sharp snap. But as the round climbed into the hundreds, heat became the enemy. The guns became so hot that the testers couldn't hold them. The metal expanded, springs softened. The Savage began to stutter. It suffered from broken parts. The extractors failed. The slide jammed. Every time a gun overheated, it was dunked into a bucket of water to cool it down, hissing like a branded steer before being pulled out, oiled, and fired again. The Savage was a fine machine, but under this torture, it began to die. By the end of the test, the Savage had suffered 37 malfunctions and broken parts. Then there was the Colt. John Browning stood nearby, watching. He knew his machine. He had personally supervised the assembly of the magazines. As the Colt fired, bang, 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 it settled into a hypnotic rhythm. The slide slammed back and forth with the violence of a pile driver, yet the gun did not falter. 1,000 rounds, no jams. 2,000, the water in the cooling bucket turned black with carbon and oil. 3,000, the testers were exhausted, their hands blistered, but the gun kept working. The Colt Model 1910 was eating the ammunition as fast as they could feed it. It didn't care about the heat. It didn't care about the fouling. It just worked. When the smoke finally cleared after the 6,000th round, the room fell silent. The board members checked the logs. They checked the gun. They checked the casings. The Savage had failed 37 times. The Colt? 0. Not a single jam, not a single broken part, not a single failure to feed, extract, or eject. In the history of U.S. Army ordnance testing, no weapon had ever achieved a perfect score under such conditions. The board's report was emphatic. This pistol is superior, practically and mechanically, to the Savage.
On March 29, 1911, the Army officially adopted the weapon as the Model 1911. John Browning had built an unbreakable machine. He had created a weapon so robust that soldiers would still be carrying it into battle 100 years later. The ancient pistol wasn't ancient, it was perfect.
The Great War was the crucible where the 20th century was forged, and it was the first real test for John Browning's masterpiece. When the American Expeditionary Force landed in France in 1917, they brought with them a weapon that the Europeans had never seen the likes of. The British officers carried delicate Webley revolvers. The Germans had the precise toggle-locked Luger, but the Americans carried a slab of steel that looked like it had been cut from a railroad tie. The trenches of the Western Front were a nightmare of mud, blood, and claustrophobia. Rifles were too long to swing in a narrow dugout. Bayonets got stuck in ribs. In the terrified frenzy of a trench raid, when German stormtroopers dropped into your hole with sharpened spades and clubs, you didn't need precision, you needed a hand cannon. The defining moment for the M1911 came on October 8, 1918, in the misty, shattered woods of the Argonne Forest. Corporal Alvin York, a deeply religious pacifist from the backwoods of Tennessee, found himself behind enemy lines. His unit was pinned down by German machine gun fire. York, a crack shot with a rifle, began picking off the German gunners one by one. Realizing they were being decimated by a single man, a German lieutenant gathered 6 soldiers. They fixed bayonets. They waited for a lull in the shooting, rose from the trench, and charged York from barely 25 yards away. York's rifle was empty. He didn't have time to reload. He dropped the rifle and drew his Colt M1911. In that moment, the ancient pistol became a legend. York didn't panic. He later said he felt as calm as he did at a turkey shoot back home. As the 6 Germans charged, screaming, bayonets leveled at his chest, York began to fire. Bang, bang, bang. He used a technique from turkey hunting. He shot the last man in the line first, then the second to last, and so on. This way, the leaders wouldn't see their comrades falling and stop the charge. The .45 caliber slugs hit the Germans with such force that they didn't just fall, they were thrown backward. York killed all 6 men with 6 shots before they could reach him. The German major, watching his men be obliterated by a single pistol, blew his whistle and surrendered his entire command. Alvin York marched 132 German prisoners back to Allied lines. He was promoted to sergeant and given the Medal of Honor. The M1911 had proven it could stop a charge that would have overrun a rifleman. After the war, the Army asked the veterans, "How can we make it better?" The soldiers loved the gun, but they had complaints. The hammer bit into the web of their hand. The trigger was too long for men with smaller hands. The grip felt slippery. In 1924, the Army released the M1911A1. It wasn't a new gun, it was a refinement. They shortened the trigger, arched the back of the grip to fit the palm better, and extended the beaver tail to protect the shooter's hand. This was the silhouette that would fight the next World War. But before it could fight Hitler, the M1911 had to fight a war at home. The 1920s and 30s brought Prohibition and the Great Depression. A new breed of criminal emerged, the motorized bandit. Men like John Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, and Pretty Boy Floyd were terrorizing the Midwest. They drove V8 Fords that could outrun police cars, and they wore thick wool coats or even stolen steel vests that could stop the police's .38 caliber bullets. The police found themselves outgunned. Their bullets were bouncing off the getaway cars. The M1911 became the great equalizer. The .45 ACP round was heavy and slow, but it had incredible mass. It didn't bounce off car doors, it punched through them. The gangsters loved the gun too. They respected its power. In fact, a rogue gunsmith in San Antonio named Hyman Lebman began modifying M1911s for Babyface Nelson. He added a foregrip, an extended magazine, and a compensator, turning the semi-automatic pistol into a terrifying full-automatic machine pistol that fired 1,000 rounds per minute. It was a street sweeper that could cut a car in half. In response, the FBI and the Texas Rangers adopted the Super 38, a high-velocity version of the 1911 designed specifically to pierce car bodies and body armor. By the time the dark clouds of World War II gathered in 1941, the M1911 wasn't just a piece of military equipment. It had been the tool of heroes like York and villains like Dillinger. It had been hardened in the trenches of France and the dusty highways of Depression-era America. It was no longer an experiment. It was an icon, ready for the greatest conflict in human history.
By 1941, on paper, the Colt M1911A1 was a dinosaur. Military technology had advanced at a terrifying speed since World War I. Airplanes had gone from canvas kites to aluminum predators. Tanks had evolved from slow metal boxes into swift armored panzers. And in the world of handguns, the Europeans had moved on. The German Wehrmacht was issued the Walther P38, a sleek double-action pistol that was safer to carry and faster to fire. The British Commandos carried the Browning High Power, which held 13 rounds of 9mm ammunition. The American GI? He was stuck with a heavy, slab-sided brick of steel that only held 7 rounds. It weighed nearly 3 pounds when loaded. It kicked like a mule. To a fresh recruit in boot camp, it felt like trying to aim a jackhammer. But war is not fought on paper. It is fought in the mud, the sand, and the dark. And in those conditions, the ancient qualities of the 1911 stopped being flaws and became lifelines. In the European theater, the comparison was stark. American soldiers often prized captured German Lugers as souvenirs. They were beautiful machines, built like Swiss watches with tight, precise tolerances. But that precision was their fatal weakness. In the freezing mud of the Battle of the Bulge or the gritty dust of Italy, a single grain of sand could jam a Luger. The 1911, by contrast, rattled. If you shook a standard-issue 1911, it sounded like a toolbox falling downstairs. But that rattle was genius. The loose tolerances meant that mud, ice, and sand had room to move without seizing the mechanism. You could drop a 1911 in a puddle, step on it, pick it up, and it would fire. It was a hammer in a world of glass vases. However, the true legend of the heavy hand cannon was forged in the Pacific. The war against Imperial Japan was different. It was primal. The Japanese army did not fight like the Germans. They utilized the banzai charge, human wave attacks, often at night, often in dense jungle where visibility was zero. Imagine you are a Marine on Guadalcanal. It is 2 a.m. The jungle is alive with insects, heat, and fear. Suddenly, the silence breaks. A screaming wave of Japanese infantry bursts from the bamboo, bayonets fixed, officers wielding katanas. They are not shooting from a distance. They are running straight at you. They are 5 seconds away, 3 seconds. This was where the debate between 9mm and .45 ACP ended. The European 9mm is small and fast. It is a penetrator. It tends to drill neat holes through a target. In an adrenaline-fueled charge, a man shot with a 9mm might not even feel it immediately. He
He might have enough momentum to run those last 10 yards and drive a bayonet into your chest before he realizes he's dead. The American .45 ACP is different. It is a slow, heavy, fat bullet. It moves at subsonic speeds like a flying ashtray. When a .45 hits a human body, it doesn't just drill a hole, it dumps all of its energy instantly. It smashes bone, it spins the target around, it stops the forward momentum. There are countless stories from the Pacific of Marines whose rifles jammed or ran dry during a charge. They switched to the old slab side. One famous account from the Battle of Cape Gloucester describes a Marine officer whose position was overrun. A Japanese officer charged him with a sword, screaming. The Marine drew his 1911. He didn't have time to aim. He pointed and fired one shot. The heavy bullet hit the charging officer in the shoulder. It didn't just wound him. The kinetic energy spun him around violently, knocking him flat into the mud. The sword flew out of his hand. The charge was broken. The GI loved the heavy hand cannon, not because it was pretty or light or high capacity. They loved it because of the psychological comfort it provided. In the foxholes of Okinawa and Iwo Jima, soldiers called it the thumb. The joke was that if you hit a man in the thumb with a .45, he'd fall down. It was an exaggeration, of course, but it spoke to the absolute trust they placed in the weapon. When the enemy was 10 feet away and closing fast, you didn't care about having 13 rounds of maybe. You wanted 7 rounds of definitely. The 1911 was heavy, yes, but that weight absorbed the recoil. It was low capacity, yes, but if you hit what you were aiming at, you didn't need to shoot twice. By 1945, the ancient pistol had proven that in the brutal calculus of close-quarters combat, nothing beats heavy steel and a big bullet. It was the only friend that never jammed when the world was ending.
In 1945, the world changed. The atomic bomb had been dropped. The jet engine had been invented. The age of wood and steel was ending, replaced by the age of plastic, aluminum, and silicon. Yet, in the holsters of American GIs, one thing remained exactly the same: the Colt M1911A1. The military had millions of them in stock. They were scratched, their finish worn down to silver steel, their grips stained with the sweat of the Pacific and the mud of Europe. But they were paid for, and they worked. So when the Cold War turned hot in Korea in 1950, the old war horse went back to work. The Korean War offered a new kind of hell, the Chosin Reservoir. In temperatures of 30 degrees below zero, mechanical things stopped working. Lubricating oil turned into glue. The bolts of M1 carbines froze shut. Batteries died. But the 1911? Its famous loose tolerances, the rattle that soldiers joked about, saved them. The gaps between the metal parts allowed the gun to cycle even when covered in ice. When the Chinese human waves overran American positions at night, freezing and terrifying, many Marines found their rifles useless blocks of ice. They drew their .45s. The heavy pistols kept firing, their slow, heavy bullets knocking advancing soldiers backward into the snow. The ancient pistol was the only thing standing between survival and capture. Then came Vietnam. This was a war of claustrophobia. The Viet Cong fought from a vast network of underground tunnels, the Cu Chi tunnels. They were narrow, dark, booby-trapped nightmares filled with snakes, scorpions, and enemies waiting in the dark. To fight them, the U.S. Army created a special breed of soldier, the tunnel rats. These men were chosen for their small stature and immense courage. They would crawl into the black holes armed with only a flashlight and a pistol. In the confined space of a tunnel, a rifle was useless. A grenade would kill you along with the enemy.
The weapon of choice was the 1911. It was deafeningly loud in the tunnels. Firing a .45 underground would shatter eardrums and leave the shooter dazed, but it was definitive. If a tunnel rat rounded a corner and came face to face with a VC soldier, he had one split second. He didn't need to aim for a vital organ, he just needed to hit him. The impact of a .45 slug at point-blank range in a tunnel would throw the enemy back, clearing the path. The tunnel rat kit became legendary: a flashlight, a knife, and old slab side. But time comes for everything. In the 1980s, the US military decided to standardize with NATO. They wanted a lighter pistol, they wanted high capacity, they wanted 9mm. In 1985, after 74 years of service, the M1911 was officially retired. Replaced by the Italian-designed Beretta M9. The outcry was furious. To the old breed of soldiers, trading a .45 for a 9mm was heresy. They called the 9mm Euro pellets. They mocked the Beretta as the plastic fantastic, even though it was alloy. They told stories of the Moro Rebellion and the drug-fueled warriors that 9mm wouldn't stop. But the brass had spoken. The 1911 was sent to museums and shredders. So they thought. War has a way of revealing the truth. When the United States invaded Afghanistan and Iraq in the early 2000s, reports began to filter back from the front lines. Soldiers were engaging insurgents who were high on adrenaline or narcotics. They were hitting them with 9mm rounds, and the enemy was keeping up the fight. The stopping power argument, dormant for 20 years, exploded again. Quietly, the elite units of the U.S. military began to raid the storage depots. The Marine Corps Force Recon, U.S. Navy SEALs, and the Army's Delta Force didn't trust the 9mm. They wanted the man-stopper back. They pulled the old 1911 frames out of mothballs. They rebuilt them. They added rails for lights, textured grips for gloves, and modern sights. They created the MEU SOC pistol, a modernized Frankenstein version of John Browning's 1911. In 2012, the Marine Corps officially placed an order for 12,000 new .45 caliber pistols, designated the M45A1. It was a 1911, built with modern materials, but identical in design to the gun that fought the Kaiser. Think about that. In an era of drones, laser-guided missiles, and cyber warfare, the elite warriors on the planet demanded a pistol designed when William Taft was president. The 1911 refused to die because physics doesn't change. A heavy, slow bullet hits harder than a light, fast one. It survived the jungles of the Philippines, the trenches of France, the snows of Korea, the tunnels of Vietnam, and the sands of Iraq. It is the only weapon in history to serve as a standard-issue sidearm for over a century. It is not just a gun, it is the old warhorse that carried America through the 20th century, and it is still fighting today.